Welcome to the Let's Talk podcast, inspired by Mesquite ISD's Leadership and Empowerment Team, or LET for short.
All guests, including educators, students, and community members, sharing their experiences from their perspectives.
So let's have a real conversation about embracing our differences and finding common ground with your hosts, Dr. LaDonna Gully and Ted Madden.
Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk podcast. We appreciate all of you who've been listening every week. Our guest today used to have for a boss the person who is currently my boss, Dr. LaDonna Gully. She's a teacher at Florence, and that's where Dr. G was a principal for a long time. She can introduce herself in a moment. My name is Ted Madden. I work in the communications department, and I'm a 47-year-old white man.
I'm Dr. LaDonna Gully. I'm the Director of Leadership and Empowerment for our wonderful district, and I'm a 51-year-old African-American woman.
Hi, my name is Maria Gomez. I am a 28-year-old Mexican-American woman.
Okay, what's your story? Get us where you're from, how long have you been in the district, and what you've been doing.
So I am originally from Uvalde, Texas, which is like about 70 miles south of San Antonio. I was born in San Antonio. My parents immigrated in the 80s, and then they emigrated back to Mexico. So I went to kindergarten there, and then we immigrated back, and we settled in Uvalde, Texas. Grew up there, went to college at Angelo State University, graduated, and then 4 years later, after teaching in West Texas, I moved here because one of my good friends works here, and she's talked very highly of that school. So I applied, and for the past 3 years, I have been teaching at Florence Elementary.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I noticed you did not give us your age. You're not sharing.
She said
today.
28.
Did she? Oh, okay. I think you said it so fast.
Yes, I'm not afraid to say my age.
I know. And I would tell you, your experiences as a teacher, I think, has just been really wonderful. I know that you were a little bit in San Angelo. Why don't you talk about just overall, just your teaching experience?
In San Angelo, I was a fifth grade teacher for 4 years. I was departmentalized. I taught English language arts. The demographics in my school, it was a small school, it was about 300 students, but about 80% of them were, second, third generations Mexican-American students, as well as whites, and then, of course, we had a few blacks. Mm-hmm. Asians also. My personal experience there, majority of my students were Mexican Americans. Some spoke Spanish. We did not have a bilingual program. So we did receive students who came straight from other parts of the country, South America, Central America, and of course Mexico. So I did have those students as well. It was an interesting time there because I experienced San Angelo in the university, very diverse. So when I stepped out of the university and actually, integrated in the community, I noticed some differences. Mm-hmm. At the school I was in, majority of our parents, some of them spoke English, but some of them didn't. We did have a social worker who was bilingual, but majority of the time she went to other schools. So the front desk did not speak Spanish. So there was times where I would, help out and translate. Between me and maybe 3 other employees spoke Spanish. The rest did not speak Spanish. So it was interesting to see the representation. Sometimes I understood when we had open houses, we did not see a lot of parents come in. And if we did, majority of them did speak English, did know the teachers and stuff. We tried our best to reach out. I think it did help that I spoke Spanish. So just that was a little bit of the experience that I lived there.
I know we always like to ask what an educator's why is. And in your case, what was your why for getting into education? And has that changed after a few years of being in the business?
Well, originally I wanted to be a nurse. And then I went to the university and I was like, you know what, this is probably not for me. So my father, my parents did not graduate from high school. So I am a first generation student. But I noticed that when he would speak like if he were to be in a classroom in a way. So it's like he's never come out and said it. But I think maybe if he did have the opportunity, I think he would be a teacher. But I was just very natural with students, with kids. And when I decided to go into teaching, I just went and I was just able to just adapt to it very easily. My why, I always wanted to, I ended up liking kids more. And it hasn't really changed. And just the fact that instead of now making a difference, I'm starting to become a student. I'm starting to learn these kids, learn about them. I'm basically a learner, especially here at Mesquite. I've had the opportunity to work with more diverse students in my classroom, and there's a difference between the kids here and the kids where I taught. Here, they're very proud of where they come from. If I speak Spanish or if I, count fives like in Spanish or in other languages, they start mimicking me. They're not afraid to speak their native language. They're not afraid to educate students on their native language. And it's very different than in West Texas, in my personal experience. Kids over there did not really speak Spanish. I don't know if they were embarrassed or they just did not want other people to know that they spoke Spanish. So it's very different.
Mm-hmm.
This reminds me a little bit of our conversation this morning about the difference between assimilation and acceptance.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
And it sounds like here the students feel accepted to the point where they can share their language and culture. And maybe in West Texas, in your experience, maybe they were trying to assimilate more.
And there is such a huge difference between the two. And we'll have a chance maybe to even talk about that because there's a huge difference between assimilation and just accepting who and where people are. So tell me, what is the best part of your job?
The best part of my job, there's a lot, but if I were to say, in my class, my kids are able to correct me. So I give them that platform that if I'm like, I'm not perfect. So kids think that all teachers are perfect and that you're not supposed to mess up. I am an English language learner, so sometimes I'll start speaking in Spanish and I forget that it's a general classroom. So, and then they'll just look at me and I'm just like, oh, wait. And then they're like, it's okay, Ms. Gomez, we understand. But, they're very quick on correcting me. They're very quick on, I'm a writing teacher. So like, I'll be writing notes and they're like, oh, you're not supposed to put, you're supposed to put the comma here. And I'm like, oh, thank you for correcting me or things like that. So I like that. I like to see that they're not afraid to correct an adult because normally they're very scared. They think of authority figures, don't contradict them. I like that about them.
We talk about this a lot on the podcast about the framework that we're using, the framework for educational equity or equality that focuses on dignity. So in your case, we're wondering, what do you believe you do in your classroom to ensure that students feel that they belong and are included in the educational process?
Well, one, I get to, see the demographics that I have. Right now, I have, majority is Mexican Americans or from Latin descent. But I also have African Americans and I also have Asians. And I do have Caucasian kids in there. So we have a mix of everything.
Yes.
I try to focus on what my demographics is and what novels I'm going to read. How are they going to relate? I try to pick passages that they can relate to. Last year, a majority of my kids were Latinos, and they were also African Americans. That was it. I didn't have in between. Some of them were, biracial. So we read a book that I thought the kids were going to be able to first understand, and it related to current situations that we were dealing with, but from a child's perspective. The novel was based on a 4th grade level, but the content in there was very high level. So the kids had to be aware of what was going on in today's world and how it related back to the book. So it was very interesting to see their point of views. We did have a project that we did where they actually got to interview adults and be the journalists and be able to, they were able to interview Dr. Goli. And we prepped them with questions. And I told them, the questions that you ask are going to be tough questions. And you may not agree with what they say, but as a journalist, you're here to just, share the views that they have. And they did really good. We would come back and talk about it, and they would say, I really liked, what they said. And it's like, I really didn't like it. So they were able to, be able to see other people's perspective and come back and reflect on it. So we really like that.
And teaching our kids to be critical thinkers is so key. It is. We want our kids to be thinkers. We don't want them to take things at face value, but to really stop and kind of think and consider them. And I think that is exactly what that particular series did for them. The name of the book was Ghost Boy.
Ghost Boys.
Right.
Yes.
And who is that by?
I cannot remember.
Okay.
I do have the book in my classroom, but it's a recent book, and it dealt with current issues that African Americans are dealing with, but also, minorities. It's not just them, and it deals about current issues like the George Floyd, the police brutality. So the book really narrowed in on historical figures that went through that, and they're in the book. It's a really good book. I highly recommend it. Do inform the parents about it, because there may be some parents that do not want this kind of content, and that's what I did, and all parents were for it. So we went ahead and did it, and I think it's important. I think it's important because even though they're 9 and 10-year-olds, they are very capable of understanding what's going around them, especially with today.
Yeah, our students are paying attention. They are paying attention to us. They're paying attention to our behavior, how we handling and dealing with things. Absolutely, they are. And I think our students are actually a little bit more intuitive than what we give them more credit for. And so it is interesting that because we understood, you and I both understood the content, and we also understood that there could be some possible pushback with this book, that we wanted to make sure that our parents would be comfortable. And it was amazing to see our parents just be very like, oh, no, absolutely, we want this book to be taught. And I actually had several parents come up to me and say, you know what? My child learned this. He is thinking very critically. He doesn't just see things one particular way. He's really able to empathize and understand. And it's really interesting because, mind you, those students went on and now they are 5th graders. And with everything that has happened in this past year, you talk about walking away with a different perspective. Those students have come back to school. I know when I was there, and they just, they had more questions, and they want to understand why, and they want to be a part of change. And I think that I was really inspired by that. And I actually asked one student who you and I know very well, and I said, why do you think this is important? And why do you think your voice is important? And he said, if I don't speak, who will? And I thought that was so amazing. He said, if I don't speak, who will? If I don't say something, who will? If I can't stand and articulate what is actually going on, who will?
And how
Dr.
old
Gully.
is this kid?
He's 10.
He's 10 now. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Wow.
Yes.
Is that he's 10?
Amazing.
And so it gives me so much hope, about the future and, what is going to happen. I will tell you that what is really interesting is something that a lot of people do not know. And that is when we talk about education and we talk about it as a whole, according to the Department of Ed and the state of racial diversity for the educator workforce, only 11% of all of our teachers across our country are of Latin descent. And so I want to ask you, what do you think that we can do in terms of recruitment and retention of BIPOC teachers and really trying to recruit these teachers to consider the field of education?
When I first told my parents that I wanted to do teaching, they were they're very supportive. Teachers are highly valued in other countries. Here as well, they're very valued, but I feel like sometimes, with certain situations, I feel like we are underrated of, what we can do. But I know that in terms of, trying to recruit, for example, Latinas or Latinos, we have to change the narrative. For example, teachers do so much. And sometimes people don't understand the amount of things that we do. And they think it's more like a babysitting job. And it really isn't. I mean, we are shaping the future of America, of the world, actually. And it's important that, like the United States, starts taking ownership of the education and our teachers. Like, we need to emphasize that, it's not just a babysitting job, because by far it's not. We're shaping the minds of the future generations, and everything you say has meaning. Mm-hmm. So a kid is very observant of what you're doing, and they will mimic you. So we need to, starting from the very beginning, from early elementaries, like most people think that teaching is just, we're not paid as much, which is fine. But, just valuing it. Like, okay, you may not be getting paid the big bucks like lawyers and doctors, but look, this education is just as valuable as being a doctor. A doctor didn't get there without a teacher, and the support.
That's
so
right.
I think we just need to change the narrative, because most kids think, okay, money. What's going to get me more money? And it's not about that. It's like, well, what's good? Every career makes a difference, but it's just something about education. And I've learned, I've only taught very little, but I can tell kids watch, kids mimic your movements, they mimic everything you say. So it's a very vital career that many people, think it's just a teacher. Yeah. I don't know if I answered that question.
No, you did. You answered it perfectly. We have to value it. And I think my hope is that people will begin to see, and our kids will begin to see themselves as teachers and understand the level of power in that, because it truly is that. So, yeah, I agree.
Well, we're going to move on to the Let's Ask a Question segment, and feel free to pipe in, too.
Okay.
If you've got an answer to this question that LaDonna will have.
She will.
So if you do have a question, email us. Let's talk at mesquiteisd.org. And LaDonna and I have access to that email. So we're going to be reading those. So send in your question. But what is the question this week, Dr. Goley?
So a question that we had that came in was, are you teaching our children, are you teaching my child critical race theory? And what is that going to look like? And I think we've been doing a couple of segments of this because we really want to push out there within our district that we are not using that framework. We were very intentional and purposeful about what would we use and why. As you know, we have 4 core values. And one of those core values talks about very specifically cultivating culture and what is that going to look like. And so as a result of understanding and having a deep understanding of our core values, we really decided to go with the Dignity Framework for Educational Equality and use that framework that was developed by Dr. Cobb and Dr. Crownapple as a way for us to ensure that we were ultimately ensuring that dignity is honored no matter what relationship we have and what initiative we're driving as a district. We really wanted to look at that. And so we decided to choose that particular framework. We feel that it has the components that really mirror who we are as a district when we talk about belonging and we talk about empathy and we talk about having a level of patience and being open. When we talk about being appreciated and treated fairly and validated and accepted. But ultimately, when we presume, I think, a high level of competence and positive intent in people, not always looking for the negative, but really paying attention to what is the positive here. And if I presume positive intent, how is that going to change what I'm hearing and how I'm hearing it? The other part of that is really affirming differences and uniqueness and celebrating that all of that should be highly celebrated. We are different. What would have happened? We all look the same, right? And if we all said things the exact same way, there would be no conversation, right? Because you have great conversations from people who necessarily don't look or think like you, right? Mm-hmm. And so really affirming that level of uniqueness and differences is really important. The other part of that is really building relationships and building partnerships and building community. Our community here in Mesquite has changed significantly just from 20 years ago. And so we have to really affirm that and accept that and be open to that and say, you know what, yeah, we are different. And guess what? We're better for it. We are better for it and celebrate that. There are so many great things that we have here and that's happening in Mesquite. And I will tell you, I have lived here for over 20 years now. Absolutely love it. It was the best decision in terms of raising my children in a very diverse environment where they would meet and have all types of friends, and from all levels, from all income levels, from all levels of diversity and ethnicities, etc. That was important to me as a parent. I wanted to make sure that my children had that. And I know for a fact that has helped them just flourish and be able to work in any type of environment and be very successful in that. So that is really important. But the final thing that I think is even more, when you get dignity, it's really about the relationship. If you have harmed a relationship, that you really are purposeful about how do you restore that? How do you restore that, and how do you repair the harm? One of the things that oftentimes we don't do is if we do something wrong, right? We just say, I'm sorry, and move on. Because that's real simple, right? Okay, let me say sorry. And we know for some people that can be really difficult, right? But if I say I'm sorry, fine. But now how am I going to go about repairing the harm? What am I going to be purposeful about and intentional about in terms of repairing the harm? Oftentimes you hear so many people that will talk about, well, that person hurt me, or that situation hurt me, or I didn't get this because XYZ. There's harm there. And so then the question becomes, so how do I repair that? What can I do that's going to help you trust me? Because at the end of the day, this is so much about trust. However, I will tell you that dignity is so important. It's the one thing that we have. It is inherent. That means that we all deserve it because we are human. And I think that here's the thing, respect is earned, and we know that. Dignity, though, is inherent. And I think that when people start putting that connection together, they're like, oh, my goodness, I hadn't even thought about it from that perspective. When people feel like they belong and they feel like there's a high level of inclusivity, you get dignity every single time. And I think that, like, when I look at Maria over here, I experienced a room of total inclusivity, students who felt like they could tell her anything, they could share anything with her. They a high sense of belonging and ownership in that classroom, as many classrooms at Florence Elementary, and kids who, this is their school, right? This is mine. I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to own it. I'm going to do my best. That's why they were nervous today, right?
Yeah.
Because I am going to do my best because this is my school and I want to represent it as in the best possible light possible. That's what dignity is. It's about knowing what you have is the very best. And I want to continue to accentuate that by being open, by being empathetic, by having really great conversations.
That's what I like about this dignity framework. Who can argue with this? I mean, the words on here: openness, listening, appreciated, patience, empathy, dignity. I mean, that's not an indoctrination. That's just good qualities to have for a good person.
Absolutely.
Really,
to be a good human.
Yeah, it's really that simple. Yeah. We started that new segment last week called Lessons with LaDonna, which gives us an opportunity to tap into her expertise. She earned her doctorate's degree in educational leadership. So this week we're talking about the difference between equality and equity. And this is something we talk a lot about off the podcast, the difference between equality and equity.
Mm-hmm. So equality, and everyone loves to say, I want equality. Well, yeah, absolutely. We all want equality, right? And in fact, you will see banners, equality for all, right? They have them archived, right? And so let me start by saying, equality, we all want equality. We all want to have the same rights, okay? But equity is different. Because what equity does is equity gives me exactly what I need, as it would give you, Ted, exactly what you needed and what you would need, Maria. And so equity is so different because it gives each and every individual what they need. And what I need may not be what somebody else needs. Equality means we're all getting the same. But equity means that you are giving me what I need specifically to be successful. And that is the difference. And that's why equity is so important. And that's why there's such a push. And I also recognize the fact that when people hear the word equity, it can create a level of tenseness, right? Because they're thinking, okay, well, what are you going to take from me? Well, it's not me taking anything from you. It just means that I'm going to give this particular person what they need, and you will get what you need. And that's exactly what it is.
My dad was a superintendent up in Illinois for 11 years, I think it was, and he would do these presentations. And he opened it up by having a slide about the golden rule. And everybody knows what the golden rule is.
Right.
Right? I will do unto you as I would do unto myself. And then he would have the next slide, and he made up the platinum rule. And that is something like do unto others as they would have you do unto them. Like, what do you want? You don't want what I want. What do you want? And that was just a different way of thinking. I'm not just going to give you what I need. I'm going to stop and think, what do you need?
That's right.
And that's what I'm going to give you.
I like that. I think I'm gonna use
The
it.
platinum rule.
The platinum rule.
Yeah, that's Dr. Tom Madden.
I will put that under there.
All right, well, Marie, thanks for coming in. And I know you two had a good time seeing each other
We
again.
I know. I've missed Dr. Goli.
Well, I miss you too.
And I got her now. So.
Yeah.
And I love it.
You took something from us.
It's not very
I want it
equitable for you on that one. That is Maria Gomez, teacher at Florence Elementary. Please follow us on social media by searching the term LET-MISD and joining the conversation. And you can email us at letstalk@mesquiteisd.org. If you enjoy the podcast, please give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review. And if you don't like the podcast, I encourage you to follow Mom's advice. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. For Dr. LaDonna DeGoli, I'm Ted Madden. Let's talk again next week.